Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into ancient, dense legal codes and translating them into a wild journey through the magnificent, and honestly macabre, theater of early Indian jurisprudence. We are stepping way back in time to explore a world where justice was absolutely not blind, and the courtroom was a literal stage for both the divine and the deeply disturbing.
Right off the bat, let me ask you something. Could chewing a handful of wet rice actually prove your innocence? I know, it sounds literally like magic. But as we're going to see, this ancient system was this crazy blend where human biology and divine intervention got completely tangled up to act as a kind of ancient polygraph test. It's a perfect example of how the ancients tried to force order onto a chaotic world.
Section 1. The Cosmic Court and the Fabric of the Universe.
So to really grasp this landscape, we have to understand that ancient Indian laws weren't just written up by some parliament. They were considered the literal, unblinking cosmic ledger of the universe. The whole system basically rested on two massive ideas. First, you have Dharma. That's the cosmic order and duty holding absolutely everything together. But to keep Dharma intact, kings were given Danda, which literally translates to the rod, or the power to punish. Sages believed that without Danda, the world would just crash into Matsya Nyaya, or the law of the fishes. Picture sheer, terrifying anarchy where the big fish simply devour the small fish. So to stop that chaos, lawgivers came up with some truly astonishing codes.
Section 2. Unequal Justice and the Rigged Scales of the Manusmriti.
Justice back then was incredibly rigged. Take the Manusmriti code, for example. For the Shudras, the lowest caste, punishment was brutally poetic. If you raised a hand against a Brahmin, that hand was amputated. If you intentionally listened to the sacred Vedas, boiling oil was poured directly into your ears. But for the Brahmins, the highest priestly caste, the rules were completely different. Their bodies were considered sacred, which meant they were generally exempt from execution. The worst a murdering Brahmin might face was exile, but not before being permanently branded on the forehead. And the brands were hyper-specific, like a dog's foot for stealing gold or a headless corpse for murder. Your caste entirely dictated your fate.
Section 3. Divine lie detectors and trials by ordeal.
Remember that wet rice we talked about? Here is exactly how the ordeal of the sacred rice worked when there were no witnesses. A judge soaks unhusked white rice overnight. The next morning, the accused thief has to chew a handful while being aggressively interrogated. Then they have to spit it out. Wet and soft, you're innocent. Dry, uncrushed, or bloody, you are guilty. Now, if we strip away the mythology for a second, you've actually got a highly effective biological lie detector here. A terrified, lying suspect's fight or flight response totally shuts down saliva production. Their mouth gets so dry they literally bite their own gums in a panic. It wasn't magic, it was just anatomy.
But they didn't stop at biology. They literally gamified gravity. In the ordeal of the balance, the accused is weighed on a massive scale. Then secret mantras are chanted, written charges are strapped to their head, and they're weighed again. The logic here is baffling for us today. If you weighed more the second time, the sheer metaphysical weight of your sins proved you were guilty. Oh, and if the scale happened to break, which, happens with ancient mechanics, that was considered an absolute, inescapable confirmation of guilt.
Section 4. The Panopticon and Kautilya's Arthashastra.
Let's jump to the 4th century BCE. Prime Minister Kautilya writes the Arthashastra, which is a legal code completely obsessed with statecraft, economics, and absolute paranoia. He imposed the most hyper-specific fines. Get this, you could be heavily fined for failing to run and help put out a neighbor's fire. Throwing dirt on the street? Fined. If a doctor treated a patient in secret and that patient died, the doctor was executed. Even butchers were regulated. If they sold meat without bones, they were legally required to give a massive discount. And to enforce all this, Kautilya built a terrifying intelligence network. Spies disguised as beggars, monks, and street vendors were watching every single move you made. The law even reached deep into family life and astrology. Ancient legal theory combined rigid patriarchy with superstition, leading to wild practices like the Kumbh Viva. If a woman was born under a specific astrological alignment called Manglik dosha, cosmic law basically dictated her first husband would die tragically. So how do you legally trick the cosmos? She would stage a lavish, formal wedding to a banana tree, a peepal tree, or even a clay pot. Immediately after the ceremony, the tree is chopped down. Boom. She's officially a widow, the cosmic debt is paid, and she's free to marry a human man safely.
Section 5. The Spectacle of Death and Public Executions.
Execution for treason in ancient India was not done quietly. It was a grand, terrifying public theater designed to demand absolute obedience from everyone watching. Take the practice of Gunga Rao, or execution by elephant. The state brilliantly merged the majesty of the king with sheer absolute violence. These royal elephants were meticulously trained by their riders to literally play with their victims. They'd break limbs one by one with a sickening crunch, toss victims high into the air, or slice them with specially forged metal blades fitted right onto their tusks. And the elephant wouldn't deliver the final, crushing blow until the king gave the nod.
The penal codes also featured horrific animal-assisted interrogations, showing off an incredibly dark, visceral creativity. In one notoriously gruesome punishment, an inverted earthen pot full of starved rats is placed right on a victim's bare stomach. The torturer then puts hot coals on top of the pot. Terrified by the heat, the rats frantically look for the only soft, yielding surface available to escape, burrowing directly down through human flesh and internal organs.
For the absolute worst crimes, like betraying the state during wartime, the punishment was death by sawing. The anatomical logic here is just chilling. The condemned were hung upside down. Why? Because massive amounts of blood would rush to the brain, completely preventing the victim from passing out from shock. Two executioners would then saw them in half, starting from the groin. Because the brain stayed fully oxygenated, the victim felt every single agonizing second of that blade tearing through their torso until it hit the major arteries.
Section 6. The Twilight of Shadows and Surviving Oddities.
Thankfully, as India moved into the colonial era, the brutal executions faded, but the state's flair for the bizarre totally survived. When the British standardized the penal code, they left behind a trail of highly regulated, archaic laws that feel just like Kautilya's micromanagement. Technically, even today, if you find treasure exceeding 10 rupees, which is literally just a few cents, you have to legally report it to the government. Any hotel, even a massive 5-star resort, is legally required to let you use their washroom for free. And it is highly amusing to think that under the strictest interpretation of leftover colonial aviation laws, flying a paper kite classifies you as an unlicensed aviator. You technically need an aircraft permit.
Section 7. The Evolution of Dharma and Equal Justice.
This whole journey brilliantly illustrates our transition out of a dystopian fantasy and into a modern society governed by equal, evidence-based justice. The contrast is absolutely stark. Under the ancient Manusmriti, you had caste-based institutionalized inequality and magical ordeals. But under the modern constitution of India, caste discrimination is explicitly outlawed, untouchability is abolished, and equality before the law is guaranteed. And you know what's profoundly poetic? The chief architect of this constitution was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He belonged to the very Dalit class, formerly deemed untouchable, that those ancient laws had so brutally oppressed for millennia. His work forever shattered those rigged scales.
As this quote reminds us, the physical instruments of this dark era are finally gone. The jars sit empty, the ordeal scales have rotted away, and those majestic elephants are now protected wildlife. These bizarre historical artifacts serve only as a chilling, vital reminder of the long, incredibly winding road civilization had to walk to finally reach the light of human equality.
Which brings us to our final thought. We sit here today governed by modern rights and evidence, looking back at the cosmic court in total disbelief. But I want to leave you with this to ponder. As our own modern justice system continues to evolve into the future, what perfectly normal laws of today will completely shock the humans of tomorrow.
Please like and subscribe.